So, how do we dive into this kind of thing? I mean, I guess we can kind of start there, you know? Hey, we're figuring out our process too. So this is episode 2. This is just going to be Nick Hinton and myself, Ryan Sellick, and we're just going to be kind of talking about our creative processes, kind of, and you know what gives us authority about speaking over. I don't think we have any authority, but I thought a good place to start would be where we kind of met, and we met through some mutual friends, and we actually worked together at curbside valet at the airport.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I remember having many shifts together, and this was back in right around the time of the internet when those streaming sites started opening up. And I remember one of the first things you showed me was the Idiocracy movie, which is now one of my favorites. And now anytime I hear a quote from that movie in my head or otherwise, I immediately think to us hanging out in that little booth in the airport and watching video illegally. But I mean, I would not condone that whatsoever.
Oh, of course not. No.
But,
Yeah, that. Well, so we actually worked together a little bit before that.
That's right.
At the mall, and what you were valeting, right?
Yep, I was valeting and you were driving the
shuttles.
The little shuttles. I really wanted your job. But
It was a pretty sweet gig, I can't lie. And you and Zane came and rocked it out in my second floor apartment for my 21st birthday.
That's right.
And that was kind of like the beginning of our relationship. Like I didn't even know you guys all that well. I knew Zane better than I knew you at that point. And you guys were just like super, super rad in doing that because it made for a really exceptional experience. Like who the hell can say that they've had like a live band play in their second floor apartment for their birthday, you know? Like that's the most obnoxious thing that a person can do basically. But it was awesome and nobody called the cops and everyone had a pretty rad time. So, but yeah, we did spend a lot of time together in a small glass box up on the edge of a parking structure at the Indianapolis airport. You trying to teach me like how to properly practice playing the guitar and watching lots of videos and and just generally not working because there wasn't an exceptional amount of work to be done. So
that was the best job for not actually doing anything. I can't believe that people would pay me to, hey, could you move my car from here over to there? By the way, my car is super nice and it smells awesome. Right. Okay, I guess.
My $85,000 Mercedes.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's $10 an hour plus tips. Okay, all right. I mean,
and for the rest of the 7 hours of your shift, you can play the guitar.
Dude. That's when I started getting carpal tunnel. Around that time, I was working nights, and I just got a new guitar. And dude, nothing inspires you as a musician as much as getting a brand new instrument, something that plays really nice, and you're just excited to play this new instrument and make sounds with it. But right around that time, I was doing shows with a band called Foreign Object Damage, and we were doing some covers, specifically some Rage Against the Machine covers, and there was a solo in there I was trying to nail, and I could kind of pull it off by doing what's called slurring the notes. So by doing hammer-ons and pull-offs, I could kind of do it that way, but I really wanted to hit every note individually. So literally I was at this job, hunched over on my guitar. This is where I messed up. I was just hunched over this terrible posture, practicing this same thing over and over, like over and over and over. And then one day I'm like, my hand's on fire. This isn't normal.
That was a really rough time for you.
Dude, I was devastated.
Yeah, your demeanor. You started rocking that wrist brace, and you were not a happy camper at that point. So
no, that was so devastating because everything leading up to that, I was always just so certain that I wanted to be a musician, and then that happened. This injury, which it really wasn't that bad at the time, but like knowing that it was a thing, it just felt like man, did I choose the wrong thing? Is that not what I was meant to do? And I just had this complete existential crisis where I'm just like, I don't know. But actually, I want to share something with that. What actually kind of turned it around for me was I was living with Zane at the time, and I was just kind of passively watching TV one day. I wasn't really watching it, and this is before, you're really sucked into your smartphone 24/7. So I don't really know what I was doing, but I was on the couch, nobody was home, and the TV was just playing, and it was playing this like infomercial type deal. I think some guy trying to like sell his book or something, and this guy, the host of the show asked the guy, what would you recommend to these people that have been just devastated by something like, grief or cancer or death or, some really significant thing really knocks them on their ass? She didn't say ass, but really knocks them down. What would you recommend? What would you say to those people? And what he said was, well, for every one of those people that, I don't think he said let's something like that stop them, but for every one of those people that are just beat down by something like that, that are completely destroyed, I can show you 10 people that use that as a springboard into something really amazing. And I was like, holy shit, that was the perfect thing I needed to hear at the perfect time, that type of thing. And I was like, okay, well, it put it in perspective. I'm like, okay, well, this thing isn't really that bad. I mean, like, I'm still healthy. I just have mild inflammation in my hand, and I'm just like so worried about it because the thing that I was striving for, it may not look like that. So what I ended up doing was I used that as an opportunity to do something a little bit different. So I started playing like acoustic stuff, just a lot of chords, and I started doing more singing. So, I wasn't thrilled about that direction compared to where I was at, but that idea of using something like that as a springboard was just powerful to me.
And as a byproduct, you made yourself a more well-rounded guitar player. You probably understand your instrument a whole lot more than if you had just focused exclusively on that one particular, like, super technical thing you were trying to do.
Yeah.
So,
and it expanded me as a songwriter too. Like, like just having a different approach, putting words to songs and singing, not great singer, but it was good practice. It kind of got me off the ground a little bit in that regard. But yeah.
And I mean, for me personally, I kind of see a lot of parallel in. I've not always had much of a focus on creativity in my life, especially on a professional scale. Where someone's paying me for my creative input. But I mean, career-wise, I've had a background in chemical waste management, and in customer service and in sales. And then, I launched my own business, which was pretty much exclusively a creative pursuit, not only from the standpoint of developing a product and developing versions of that product. It was pork cracklings and a soy-based vegan alternative available in a variety of flavors. So developing those flavors and actually making them distinctive and complementary to like the base product. There were a lot of layers there for me, and it was essentially brand new territory because I'm not a professionally trained cook. I don't have a background in that, but I am kind of a lifelong fat kid, so like that gives me a bit of a leg up on just caring about flavor in general. So, but I realized because I've just spent so much time prior to that moment when I officially like launched a business, I spent so much time working for other people and putting myself into this really unhappy space because I felt like my own my time was being spent exclusively satisfying the needs of other people and not ever taking care of, I mean, not to get too like hippy dippy or metaphysical, but like my spirit, the thing deep inside me that longs to create, because I feel like on some level, everyone has a bit of that, some sort of inner self-expression that needs to manifest itself into the world. And what a lot of people don't realize is that can take a lot of different forms, in my opinion. And I had an epiphany at one point where I realized that every single thing that I had done, even though I spent, almost 10 years in chemical waste disposal, well, I learned a lot about chemistry. I learned a lot about regulatory bodies and how they operate and the things that they truly care about. And I learned a lot about materials management and logging and tracking things and understanding, risks, and even just learning to understand that there might be risks present that you'd not considered. So to do those deep dives and really educate yourself about stuff that you may not realize matters, but very seriously does. And one thing eventually just started feeding into another. I had a career that I was devoted to for a long time just because it paid really well, and it was interesting going around and like neutralizing chemicals in the field and digging deep into these regulatory like requirements, and so there was a lot to keep me mentally engaged, which is something that I ultimately need in a job. But and not to explode the microphone here, but I found that all of those fundamental things that I learned fed into how I approached the next job working for somebody else. But like, I learned how to work with people. I learned how to tend to customers' needs. I learned how to price large-scale jobs and learned how to sell. And all of those things eventually wound up really helping me in my own business pursuits. And then I started to see the artistic threads of it all, and essentially learned that if I'm approaching what I'm doing with my time from a standpoint of essentially just getting paid to be educated, then there's nothing that's a waste of my time, unless I exhaust all of the knowledge that there is to be gained and I spend an unnecessary amount of time like in stasis. That's not benefiting anybody. But my priorities have changed. The creative is something that's a lot more important to me. And now, luckily, I'm in a position to where I am working for someone else, so I have a stable income. But the position I've put myself in, because of the experience that I've gained and how I've approached that, is just a timeline and a pipeline, really, of accumulated knowledge that can be manipulated or looked at through a different prism and applied to something that you never would have thought that it could have been applied to. And I think on some level, that's kind of the essence of artistry, right? Like thinking in a totally different direction to express something that everyone is feeling, whether that's, on a canvas or through music or whatever the case may be. But now, life is pretty peachy for me, thankfully, but and I've got a lot of potential for the future for exercising that creativity in entirely new ways. So I'm stoked about that, and I'm stoked to be here right now on these microphones, eventually interviewing loads of people from a huge variety of different artistic mediums that some people may not have even considered as art before, really processing it as such. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for inviting me along on this journey.
Dude, it's a pleasure. I mean, you're killing it over there. Like, you're putting this in just the way that you're describing things. It's just like, yeah, it's just working really well. So
good.
One of the things I wanted to share with the audience was, I know this story, but could you tell the audience about how Pig Chips was born? Because that's an interesting creative thing. Like, sure. That you recognized an opportunity, and you did a little experimentation, and then you got a little feedback, and you're like, hey, there's something here, Well,
I'll leave out the part about trying to cast magical spells.
Okay.
And get right into
that. That's a whole other episode.
It might be an entirely different podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's at least an element of joking to that. So kind of from the outset, I was in a place where I was experimenting with a ketogenic diet, just because, like I said, I've always kind of been a fat kid, and I found a lot of short-term success with that diet programming. And also it was just mostly pretty delicious a lot of the time, enough butter and salt and sweaty beef, like I'm into that, I'll drink that juice from the pan. I don't care. But there are not a lot of delicious, crunchy snacks on a keto diet, or at least there weren't. and I was so burnt out on like puffed pork rinds. And I wanted something with a little more texture. And I spent a lot of time in my youth living in the South, and I've had really good pork cracklins. And my wife is Hispanic, and chicharrones, like the chicharrones con carne, like the big strips of pork skin with like fat and meat attached that you literally like eat as a meal, douse it in salt and lime juice and hot sauce. And it's just, I mean, it's just greasy, crunchy, delicious goodness. It's if you like pork, and sorry if anyone's listening and is vegan and is just totally repulsed by this, I apologize. I'm not trying to gross you out, but it's something that I love so deeply. So please don't judge me for that.
He did make a vegan alternative called Vegan Crunchy. So, you know, he didn't want to alienate anybody from the greasy goodness.
Right. Yeah. I at the end of the day, I'm all about inclusivity. And while I might love something that totally yucks somebody else out, I want to make sure that they're also cared for.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I found myself in a situation where I was just done with all of my current snack options. I was like miserable, and went to a local Kroger, and found what I thought was going to be the solution to all my problems. It was like some super country looking pork crackling situation. And it, like, I could see that it was kind of greasy from the inside of the package. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. And I started salivating. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get these home and tear into them. And got them home and almost immediately, like, nearly broke a tooth. They were too hard to eat. They were completely unpalatable. They were greasier even than how they looked, but in a really kind of gross way. And they didn't seem like they had been seasoned at all. So I'm like, all right, knowing what I know of pork and pork skin and how it can be manipulated, I'm pretty sure that I can salvage this. So I threw what I had purchased into a pan and just started trying to render out some of that excess fat and hopefully crisp up some of the parts that were too hard to consume, so that way you could kind of crunch through them. And I'm just adding seasonings that I feel like will complement one another. Like I'm going for something that's got a little bit of spice to it and has got plenty enough like salt to satisfy my like my potato chip type cravings, and wound up making something that just like it was exactly what I had kind of envisioned in my mind, and I was really shocked by that. But more than that, I was shocked by how tasty they were based on the seasoning blend I'd created. My wife, because I'm the type of person, I've had a million ideas for stuff. They're not all good ideas or even ideas that are, maybe not bad ideas, but ideas that are anywhere close to attainable, given, like financial situation or whatever. But I have a tendency to like get real hyped up, and my wife, knowing exactly how I can be sometimes, usually writes me off. But I go and I shove this stuff in her face and I'm like, hey, try this and tell me what you think. And she's like, oh my God, I would spend money on that. And I'm like, all right, bet. Let's go and test this theory. So I took him to work the next day. I was just in like a customer service and sales type role for a large national company that was based here in Indianapolis. But pretty much unanimously, anyone that had any sort of an affinity for pork skin said, yes, I would absolutely spend money on this. This is delicious. And I was like riding a hard high at that point. So I went immediately that same day after work and I stopped by a butcher shop and bought like I feel so bad now, like knowing just how shitty this was. But I basically had the butcher scalp this beautiful pork belly and took all of the fat and a little bit of the meat and the skin from it and just left this like probably unsellable, because it couldn't be bacon without the fat on it. It's not going to react the same way as pork belly without the fat, like during the cooking process. So a really nice and expensive cut of meat that was just trashed for the purposes of my experimentation. But it turned out to be perfectly what I needed, because I had this idea in my mind of taking that like Hispanic style chicharron, like the big one, the greasy, meaty but like thoroughly desiccated and shelf stable one, and putting that into a bag as like a bite-sized snack. So I cut it up, kind of in the image of what I was hoping to achieve, and cooked it blindly based on what I thought it was going to need. And it turned out to be like kind of a complicated process, but all of my hypotheses pretty much right out of the gate proved true, just because of how like focused I was on what it was going to take, because it was like I was possessed. Like the entire thing seemed like it was totally on rails. Like it had nothing to do with me. It was like something that just needed to be breathed into the world, because I was just making the thing. But what turned out like that second night of experimentation was like I had plucked it directly out of my mind's eye and put it into a bowl and served it like hot and fresh to my wife and kids. And like if the reviews the first day were substantial, the second day they were overwhelming. So again, that very next day, I just went and bought all the pork skin I could find, like fresh from the butcher, with this very specific cut. And probably throughout the course of that like early stage, wound up totally ruining hundreds of dollars worth of pork belly. But they eventually cut me off. They were like, "Hey man, we can't do this anymore because it's ruining all of our pork belly." And I was like, "Oh shit, sorry guys," but found a pretty steady supply elsewhere. And eventually, and while the business itself only ran for about 2 years due to a host of issues on the back end, just relating to capital mostly, because I was all self-funded. I was taking my weekly paychecks from my day job and pretty much diverting all that I possibly could of them into building up, the equipment and materials needed to make it happen, bags, bag sealers, stuff like that. But got to a place where in our second year of business, we sold I plus like the couple of homies who were just wonderful and generous enough to like lend their time. We sold like 30,000 bags of snacks in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah. And internationally even, like I was mind blown, and then ultimately hit a hard wall where, based on regulation, I couldn't wholesale at what I had initially been told I could by a much smaller government entity that didn't really know some of the finer points of the scale that I was trying to operate under. So didn't have the $200,000 to build out my own dedicated facility. The rented commercial kitchen that was like a shared kitchen space wasn't good enough to wholesale even locally throughout the state. So just kind of had to stop. Mm-hmm. It was a sad time for me. It was a really dark time for me, honestly, just emotionally. I don't know that I've ever hit a lower point. And I've hit some low points in my life. Ryan, better than anybody, knows that I've hit some low points in my life, and nothing compared to like just the emotional devastation of having to make the decision to stop doing what I was doing because I couldn't afford to. And it sucks because it was super successful. Like we made a lot of people really upset when like we had to pull the trigger on shutting it down. But I've not given up hope. There's definitely still a universe that exists where a Pig Chips reboot is very strongly possible.
Right.
So, hey, send us lots of money so I can relaunch my pork skin business.
Yeah. We like money.
Yeah. It's a little too early to be begging for it, but
yeah, we're not going to beg.
Trust us, we'll get there.
We also like having, honor and pride and, genuinely enjoying ourselves as human beings.
For sure.
Yeah. Don't think I'm not paying attention when I'm messing with the mic here because, it was just like, it was connected to the table. So every time you touch the table, it was causing like a little thing in there. Oops. I'm even going to leave that in here because, we're figuring this out as we go. We're, it's kind of one step at a time. I just didn't want to give you the impression that I'm sitting here being antsy. I'm just like, man, is this really like, I feel like I'm picking up a lot of you here, but the first few episodes are going to be what they are. Like,
yeah, this is raw, gritty, and real, Ryan Sellick.
We're down in the mud. No, I didn't know you sold that many bags. Like that's a lot of pig chips, and the pig chips are delicious, man. I've tried so many different chicharrones now, and while some of them are really good in terms of texture, you know, I haven't been able to find one that had a good balance of good texture and good flavor, and yeah.
People have tried, but they just can't come close. I'd sell that secret recipe though. $50,000, and I'll sell you the pig chips recipe.
That's a steal. Like if there's any like billionaires out there that just want to dominate the pork crackling market.
Yep,
that's a small step there.
I mean, they won't have the out of the gate brand awareness of the pig chips name. The price tag for that is much, much higher.
Oh yeah. We'll talk about that off
But the recipe I'd sell. So what about your most catastrophic experience in artistic creation? What did that look like for you?
My catastrophic experience,
or emotionally damaging. Let's just get right to the bottom.
Man, that's almost the baseline of where I operate creatively is just emotionally fucked up, you know. Gosh, well, there was that first one when I got the carpal tunnel because I felt like I had so much good momentum going forward, and I had, you know, I was with foreign object damage at the time, and you know, I was just really inspired and just wanted to keep getting better. I was so hungry, you know.
Yeah.
I was so hungry. I was, you know, working a part-time job. I was going to college. I was in the band, but I was also like kind of taking the lead on things because, you know, sometimes in a band it's kind of like herding cats. You know, it's hard for a single person to start making forward momentum. So, you know, I was just like, well, I know what needs to be done. I just need to tell you guys what needs to be done. I can do that, you know. So I was doing a lot of that. I was stretching myself really thin, and then, you know, that happened, and I'm just like, well, it's almost like, you know, if I believed in God in this very like kind of tangible, like personified way, if I would, you know, it's like, well, like I thought I understood what you wanted me to do, man, and how you're punishing me for it. Like, what the fuck, you know? Yeah, but like I said, you know, eventually I used that as a springboard, and it ultimately helped me grow. You know, I was also in a band called Dead Birds Adore Us for a while, and I was pretty devastated when that wrapped up, because I felt like
you ain't the only one, man.
Yeah, dude. While I really enjoy what we did accomplish, we did release a full album, and it's basically anywhere you can stream an album, and like to that it almost feels like I'm putting it in the ether. Then it's just like, okay, now it's gonna be there after I'm dead, so that's a cool feeling. But I felt like the direction where we were going was like a really kind of untapped territory, you know. It was kind of taking that progressive music vibe, taking that rock vibe, but also channeling it in this really interesting and intricate way. So when that wrapped up, devastated.
You guys, like, you were appealing to a niche, meanwhile carving out a chasm, and like not everybody, I think, realized the gravity of that at the same time, or maybe they did and it just freaked them out. Yeah. Because I firmly believe, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass because I love you, but I firmly believe that if you guys had not had that interruption and we're riding that momentum that you had accumulated up to that point now,
dude,
who knows? You guys would definitely be at a bare minimum some sort of like regional touring band.
Oh, for sure. Like if I can get everybody on board with that, that's where I wanted to go. And like it really doesn't take a whole lot to do that, you know.
Sure.
But you can do that yourself and hoof it. But man, being a musician in a band like that's such a demoralizing creative pursuit in the beginning. Sure. You know, I can't speak towards like, you know, really successful people because I haven't quite tasted that. But I mean, like just like I said, herding cats, but also covering all of the expenses, and it just feels like what you're doing, unless you're really, really good and it's really clicking with people, what you're doing, it just doesn't feel appreciated. You know, it's just like people all the time try to get bands to play for free. They're like, hey, play for exposure. And there's all these funny internet memes where like they try to apply that to like other jobs, and it just seems absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, And then, the whole music industry being what it is, like, I feel like it's moving away from this sort of product-based market where the idea is that you're selling this particular physical product. Like, it's moved on from that in a lot of ways. Like, some people are doing really creative things as far as that goes. Actually, one of my friends is going to be on, Jessica Heckel, and she's doing something awesome. So we're going to have her.
That's going to be exciting.
That's going to be exciting. We're going to interview her this, I say interview. We're going to talk with her. Like, it's not really about interviews, but we're going to talk with her on Thursday, and she's got some cool stuff to share. But anyway, didn't mean to get sidetracked there. I'm just really excited about that. But as a whole, the music industry is moving away from this product market. Not many people are buying CDs and buying like artist things like that. It's more about the constant stream of attention. So a lot of people are being much more successful by being as prolific as possible by releasing to these like digital platforms and keeping a constant stream of attention going. So it's just like if you get a few thousand people paying attention to you on a regular basis, you could potentially turn that into something like substantial.
Absolutely.
But I forgot how I got on that subject. We were talking about Dead Birds Adore Us.
Yeah.
Drawing a blank.
Oh, we were talking. I asked you about like emotional devastation in terms of.
Yeah.
That
went way off the rails. Okay.
No, I mean it followed a natural current.
Yeah.
So, but point is, that's like one of your top two is the dissolution of Dead Birds.
Dead Birds for sure. I was kind of in the weeds about like how demoralizing it is as a musician. And it's so hard to keep something like that together, especially when people have other priorities, especially when people have families and significant others, and ultimately it just kind of pulled us apart because we wanted to explore opportunities in other places. But we're still all friends. We still jam together occasionally, and that's a lot of fun. And
realistically, absolutely the most talented and creative guys individually that I know. So I see nothing but potential for success in all of your futures together or apart. So, but one thing you mentioned, the demoralizing factor, I feel like that's something that's going to kind of present itself. We've talked off mic about, how this Forging Flame project will look eventually, and how common threads might present themselves through these discussions that we'll have with people. And I think that that's likely to be one of the most prevalent is regardless of artistic medium. I mean, those memes exist for bands, but I've also seen those exact same memes for graphic designers. How many graphic designers do you think we could talk to that have had hundreds of people beg them for free work in exchange for exposure? Exposure on your brand new project that already has 0.0 eyeballs on it. So, I mean, I think that's something that'll ring true for anyone listening. Yeah. But especially hard, though, like it's got to be especially hard for a musician. And while not to discredit, say your average graphic designer who, went to school for their trade and is excessively talented, both technically and like kind of fundamentally on the marketing and appearance side of things, but for a band, a group of people all trying to work towards the same common pursuit, essentially, who have likely spent a hell of a lot more time at the helm of their instrument than, at a graphic design interface of some sort. Like, I could see that's it's a lot more time and emotion invested in that outcome, only to be kind of treated like a second-rate citizen.
That's cute.
Back into steerage with you, plebe.
Yeah. Oh, you can make pretty sounds with your little wooden guitar thing there? That's nice. Does it make any money? No, I don't care.
Pluck your strings for us.
But at the same time, also, it's such a emotionally investing thing. Like, it's so deeply personal, and it can become such a, like, that can lead to part of the paralysis with it because it's not quite as perfect as you want it to be, and it's so personal that you don't want people to think you don't want to work so hard on something and then to put it out and people are like, well, that sucks, or even worse, like, that's all right, it's okay. It's okay. That's cute. I'd rather somebody be like, I hate you, I hate your soul. Like, I'd rather evoke like an intensely negative response than like indifference, you know,
Super
as an artist.
Tepid, like,
Imagine somebody eating your pig chip and they're like, I mean,
it's fine.
I guess if I was starving, you know, like, and I had nothing better to do. And
well, at the end of the day, like you can recognize like if it's a food product or, you know, a band or a song, everyone has preference and it's easy to absorb. They don't like this because it isn't for them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't make it for them. I wish they liked it, but you can't. There I go, exploding the mic again. You can't. Yeah. You just can't invest any of your emotion into
what other people are thinking.
That, but that wishy-washy response, that super dismissive, like can't be bothered to even process this, like that stings. That I've seen that from behind the table of a sampling booth, and it's definitely not fun. I'm like, well, you just obviously don't understand how much of myself I've put into this. It can be a little mania. Yeah, right? Like, oh, it's an unhealthy behavior for sure.
Yeah. But it's something that I feel a lot of creatives experience, you know, it's hard not to when, especially when you do create from the heart and you do make this something so incredibly personal and you're just putting it up for the entire world to see. And you know, some people are assholes and they like to just, all they do is criticize and like, yeah, you know, they just nitpick it and stuff. It's just like, and most of those people don't really do anything, you know, by the way. Like I noticed this, I mean, this is really far removed from everybody's consciousness because of how fucking crazy the world is right now. But last year, the biggest complaint was the end of Game of Thrones. And now I get it because I'm very invested in that show too. I love the show. I'm actually finishing up the last book. It's a great story. It has great archetypal like type of, you know, characters and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like just really thinking about the symbolism. It's magnificent. But unfortunately, the producers decided like, okay, we don't want this to be our whole life forever. So they started like, okay, well, we gotta finish this up, and you're finishing up with a different formula than when you started. So I looked at it from that perspective as a creative, knowing that like, okay, well, you know, this is what it is. Like, but I kind of decided that I'm gonna enjoy it anyway. You know, it's certainly gonna be better than sitting in a blank room. You know, it may not resolve in a fully satisfying way, but I kind of knew at the outset that was going to happen. But so the last season, disappointing to a lot of people, I was still having fun with it, you know. And Jesus Christ, how did I get on that topic?
Well, it's worth getting into because I've got some feelings about it as well.
Yeah.
Not that it's especially relevant to the overall theme or purpose of our show, but you know, examining the art of it is worth exploring. And for me, how that affected me, while I've not read any of the books and didn't necessarily have much emotionally invested in the outcome either way, you know, I agree. I agree insofar as. You know, it's okay to not have the resolution that you want in the end of a series that you really love or the end of a movie or even a book. You know, and ultimately, like if you cry about that, you should probably just stop. Yeah. Without being too cruel, just stop. But also, there are times when, as a consumer of art, and it's especially easy to get like really attached to content like a show, like a series. Mm-hmm. But like you kind of can't help but feel like your mouth has just been directly shat into. Yeah. At least that's how I felt by the end of Game of Thrones. Like I tried, you know, and I always try to like take myself out of it if I feel a certain way and like try and view it from a different perspective. But I'm like, man, you guys just didn't pay us any service at all.
Oh man, I disagree, dude. There was some cool shit on that, man. That was like, and the feeling that I got before the third episode, man, like I've never gotten that from any like film or anything. It was just
which one was that?
That was the Long Night one. So
that was great. I did love that.
I mean, you know, even in retrospect, I can look back on it and say, well, that didn't quite resolve on how I would have wanted that episode to be a whole season. But at the same time, like that feeling of dread in the beginning of it is just like, oh shit, man. Like they've been playing with this energy of an undead army since the beginning of the show, but like the actual terror of it didn't really occur to me until I'm like, oh shit, they are like, there they are. They're coming. Like the darkness of the episode was really good, really helped the uneasiness feeling of it.
Sure. And like so my biggest issue is not so much the entire last season, right? Because for that intense, and very anxiety-inducing, battle sequence, I was all on board. The aftermath, the destruction, even the lack of desired resolution. I feel like my personal issues are more related to more of the behind-the-camera stuff. And, like one particular story thread resolution that I just felt like it felt like there was a distinct lack of effort in a lot of really critical ways in terms of an overall piece of art. It's like, if you deliberately left this unfinished in some way, can you please give me some hint as to why? I just feel like everybody fucked off, and that was a problem for me.
Yeah, and the thing is like knowing what I know about like production and everything, I know that is absolutely not the case. Well, I mean, I can't say absolutely not the case. It just sounded cool when I said it, but like what I mean is the everything was so rushed. You know what I mean? That was a product of everything being rushed and moved along. So if you look at it from this broad perspective of the amount of time that's invested in this particular story, the first 6 seasons have all of the time it takes to produce that and all of the time that George R.R. Martin spent writing the book. So it's almost like the cumulative energy was heavier with the first 6 seasons. I mean, they started diverting already, but still. I remembered, though, how I got on that topic. I was talking about people being critical of your art that you put up. Yeah. And people were so critical. And I'm just like, okay, no, I get it. You go make your own fantasy epic, and let's see how fucking good it is. Like, I'm gonna pick that shit apart, and I got a master of science. I can fucking rip it apart. I just like saying I'm a master of science, but yeah, I do have a master of science. But yeah, like, that's one. It's that byproduct of being rushed. I'm sure could be construed for a lack of effort, but because it's really a deficiency of energy being put into it.
I'm definitely the asshole here.
That's fine. You're a lovable asshole.
I'm comfortable being the asshole because I'm also willing to acknowledge that I'm probably totally off base. That's just how it impacted me.
That's valid.
Yeah. So I still very much respect and appreciate the fact that it takes an awful lot to make something like that happen, and it's probably something that's well beyond my own personal ability.
It's insane. I watched that from the perspective of a producer, and I'm just like, I have no idea how they did any of this. There's no way I could possibly do better, especially without source material. It's just like, oh my God, like, just the sheer amount of effort that did go into it. I was blown away, but all of that stuff, all of like Hollywood productions and stuff. I still look back on old movies. I was watching Starship Troopers the other day, and I'm like, Jesus Christ! For that time, like the visual effects in that movie were outstanding, and like even by today's standards, they're still really good.
Well, even looking at stuff far older than that, and seeing some of the editing tricks that were used to convey, some sort of tension, and when digital was out of the question, probably still 20 years from even existing, like that's pretty remarkable. I mean, even down to something as simple as like the silhouette in Psycho, the shower scene, like great, and you never really see anything specific happening. So just little creative tricks like that, because you can only work within the confines of what you've got. Like, I really love hearing Kevin Smith talk about his movie making process, because he, for as long as I've followed anything he's done, which hasn't been a whole lot lately, but I was a huge fan of his podcast when it was a new thing. he always talked about, like in discussing his movie Red State, he was severely limited by budget there, way more so than he was with movies like Dogma or Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. But he always felt that the budgetary limitations pushed the creative envelope in ways that would have otherwise resulted in kind of a lazier approach to one particular issue, which I think is great. Like a little bit of pressure. I mean, even when you're gardening, you deprive a plant of a little bit of sunlight or vital nutrients for a specified amount of time, and you wind up, bearing more fruit or bigger, juicier fruits, as it were. Particularly like in gum trees. Gotta love juicy fruits on gum trees. But forgive me for that.
I didn't follow you there. I was just like kind of just smiling and nodding, like, okay, yeah.
Anyway, well, and we've gotten way off track of what we had originally.
It doesn't matter, but I think you touched on a thread there, like one of those things that I think we're going to see when we're exploring creativity is there is that element of stressing something to produce a better outcome. Like I feel like that's just like one of those things that pervades many things on the planet. Like like exercise is really bad for you. Like you're breaking your muscles down, you're getting tired, you're elevating your heart rate. What's good for you is when your body recovers from that exercise, then it grows to be able to adapt more exercise. And it's that type of thing that when you stress a creative in that way, sometimes they can use it to push beyond, like maybe in the Game of Thrones example, maybe it was just way too much because you got this huge production. You basically, I mean, thinking about it, that's 6 movies and people were bitching because it wasn't happening within a year. And I'm just like, you go make 6 fucking movies, man. Like, you do it. That just annoyed me because I understood what went into it and that it's like it's still magic to me, like how they do it. And
you're creating an entirely different world, essentially.
Yeah.
But
that world's not good enough.
On sound stages and like existing forests in the United States, like, or elsewhere in the world. I don't know where most of Game of Thrones was shot.
I think it was mostly in Belfast, and they had some stuff in Spain, and I think New Zealand. That was Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But mostly in Belfast, I think. Yeah, so Ireland's fucking gorgeous, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But yeah. Creativity.
So one thing that we had discussed about trying to approach in this hour, I mean, you can call our last episode 1. This is our first real meaty bit here. We're taking some deeper exploration. We've got much more time. We've introduced ourselves in the past already. So what the creative process, at the risk of sounding like I'm interviewing you, I guess I kind of am. So
interview me away.
Ryan.
Interview away.
When you are making music, how that happen?
How that happen? That's a good question. How anything happen? It happens in a lot of different ways. It's almost like every single song has its own how that happened.
Nice.
So let's just talk about Dead Birds Adore Us. Okay. We had a very particular process there, and like we explored all different kinds of things. And like the thing that ended up really working was all 4 of us getting in a room and kind of playing around with an idea. Like somebody's got a small little riff, some little idea, and then we kind of develop maybe somewhat of a contrasting idea. And we were like 2 or 3 years in, and we maybe had like 3 or 4 songs, but like we had a whole library of ideas, and we just had a hard time making a song out of those. Yeah. So it ended up turning into just a really experimental process where we're just constantly playing the ideas over and over, trying different approaches. It was almost as much of a discovery process as it was a creative process. Like it felt like we weren't really we weren't behind the wheel there. You know, we were just kind of putting it up and saying, hey, what about this, I guess? And then sometimes the thing itself would almost like tell us, yeah, more of that, go this way, Well,
I can say, okay, from the outside perspective, because so the way that looks, that initial first stage process with you guys, essentially looks like a jam, right? Like everyone just kind of playing continuously and exploring some of those threads that pop up where someone's already got like kind of in the cooker, right? And for me, because I know I've watched a ton of rehearsals with you guys, at a certain point, it very much became a situation where it seemed like every single one of you guys was essentially just holding your instrument up to be played. So like when you say that it seemed like none of you was really behind the wheel, that's exactly how it translated to me watching you guys. And maybe it was because I was not especially sober, in whatever manner. Maybe that's got something to do with it. But
it definitely feels like that. It feels like you're being channeled.
Yeah.
And maybe it's that way with most. I mean,
I felt that sense, with my own stuff.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, you could break it down to the nervous system, and you are being channeled. Like at first, the effort is you're training the nervous system to perform this specific thing or to react a certain way to your current state.
Yeah.
And then eventually, the nervous system is just like, I got this. Like, and then your job at that point is just to get out of the way.
Yeah.
Like, for example, whenever we were playing shows, if we were playing shows and I thought for a second about what somebody else is hearing, not necessarily what they're judging, but what they're hearing or what they're perceiving or anything else, I would start fucking up. Like, I would I would lose. I had to stay completely in the moment. I had to just be like, okay, this is the moment. My hands know what to do. I just got to hang out, and watch. But if I think for a second, man, they might not think my guitar is loud enough, or man, I can't really hear Noah. Like maybe they don't really hear Noah. And as soon as I start thinking about that, I start trying to do two things, and then I lose it, and then
sucks you right out.
But we were really good at recovering too, because we played together so often that we get lost, and then I look at Dan, and then and then Dan gets me back because he just has the body language that just.
And he's laughing at you while he's doing it
laughing
too.
At you. Yeah. For some reason, that just reminded me of a funny thing, tangent. But we were playing one day, and he was playing drums, and this may not translate well to audio, but he's playing drums, and I basically see him rocking his head back and forth and making this weird face, and I wasn't sure like what was going on. Like I'm playing the song, but I'm watching him like, is he okay? And then he like sneezes on me. So the whole time he's making this face, and I'm like, what's going on there, Dan? And then he sneezes and he hits the snare, and then he like hits a fill, and he's just right back into the song. I'm like, that was awesome. I know what happened there.
Oh God, that's definitely like a very, very special moment to keep in your memory banks, because it's just so goddamn funny.
Oh, dude, that was hilarious, and like that's family friendly funny.
Oh yeah,
everybody can get a kick out of a drummer sneeze that you can't hear. That's what made it funny, is I couldn't hear it, obviously, because my amp is pumping in his face, and
right.
But yeah, playing with Dead Birds, man, that was a good time. It's just really cool to be that tight with a musician, and like, dude, none of that is lost. Like it's all still there. Like, I went to Noah's house last week, and it was like we never stopped. Just like we just jumped right back into the groove, and we just hung out there for a couple hours, and we threw it up on Facebook Live for fun.
Nice.
That was fun. But yeah, that connection that's just forged from 3 hours of practice, 2 to 3 practices a week. Constant.
Right.
And it was awesome. It was fun. Like playing in a band with your boys. You're not only you're not only musicians together, but you're also like best friends. And it's just. Yeah, nothing like it.
It's pretty exceptional. And I mean, you guys, I always loved watching you guys play out, man, because you do just kind of operate on a very particular frequency together. It's like there's everyone else's like energy or aura or whatever you want to call it, just that kind of like hive mind wavelength that everyone's on when they're kind of in a mass people situation. Mm-hmm. And then you guys, not just because like you're up on stage, but just because your frequency, your like mental pipeline with each other, the thing that's just unspoken but you all obviously understand simultaneously, is so much higher than everyone else's. And it's I don't know. It's real special. You guys are a unique breed for sure.
We were superior humans to all other humans, but broken apart, we're just superior humans on our own, I guess. No, I'm kidding.
Tell me more about how great you are.
There's that quote about pissing excellence. I really don't like that quote, but it first came to mind because I got to pee really bad. So I'm going to go do that, and we're just going to sync this back up.
We'll pause it. Take a quick pee break.
Yeah, pee break. We are rolling again.
All right.
And
take a swig of agua. Mm-hmm. Give her a little clapper.
There it is.
All right, so back to Game of Thrones.
Yeah, back to Forged in Flame, Game of Thrones podcast.
Forging Flame?
Forging Flame, rather. Yeah. I still don't know the name of this. It's not quite embedded in my... we've tossed around so many ideas of it that things are conflicting when they're coming out. Like, wait, what is it called? It's one of those things. But yeah, so we were talking about process, and you asked how you do that, and we kind of went on to Dead Birds Adora's process, which is a very experimental process of discovery, and it's almost like the thing is kind of making itself, and we're channeling it. And,
right.
A lot of those elements are still present in my own music. I've been releasing music under the name Lead Salad. Or
Delicious.
if you have an Amazon Alexa device, you say Lead Salad. Actually, Lead Salad doesn't even work anymore. Alexa just blacklisted me or something. Like, I don't know. Maybe I suck.
She's a fickle one, that Alexa.
She's a fickle woman. So with Lead Salad, that's really my solo efforts, and that's just really part of that is me discovering my own creative process by myself, because I'm used to having other people and other voices in the room and bouncing ideas back and forth, and I'm kind of having to do that on my own, which is like I can do one thing on my own, but I can't react to that one thing while I'm doing the one thing, so I have to have something to bounce off of. And sometimes the process would start by in one of my pedals I have a little looper that I can loop a small idea that I come up with, and then I can come up with a counter idea. So I kind of need something to react to, and then eventually that turned into the computer itself. Like I could come up with a beat or with a small guitar riff or something like that, which usually those just happen by just tinkering around and screwing around until something sounds interesting, catches your ear.
Right.
And the process almost feels like it's like these ideas come or these ideas start forming, and it's just kind of like, okay, well, there's a thing. Do I want to go down that road? Do I want to explore that? Do I want to keep going with that? And then it's just a matter of like investing energy. So there's that bouncing back and forth between something, even if it's an inanimate thing like a computer or a looper, and then sort of starting to add on it until it takes shape. And it's a really arduous process, especially doing the drums. Drums are really challenging to do on a computer and make them sound natural, or at least have some kind of human element to it.
Sure.
I really see that project as being sort of a synthesis between between analog and digital. Like, I try to have a digital vibe a little bit with like some of the beats, but then I also like to have a very free flowing kind of like almost just a natural kind of vibe to it. Because if you go too far in one way or the other, I feel like it's kind of been done, you know. But combining those two worlds in an interesting way is kind of what I'm going for there.
I think you did a good job of that with Andromeda.
Yeah.
That one's not out yet, right?
Nope, that one's not out. I was hoping to release everything on June 29th. That's my mom's birthday. But didn't quite make it in time. So I'm thinking either early July or mid-July is probably when it's going to be released. But it's one of those things where I just kind of have to let it, like it's going to come out when it comes out. It's just kind of, it's it's a little silly sometimes putting a deadline on a creative pursuit. It's like putting a deadline on, having a baby or something. It's just like, well, I'm scheduled to have it on the, I mean, I guess you can do you can induce labor. I wish there was something like that for music. Like I could just induce the labor of the song and just get on with it.
Well, it would be especially hard to do that solo as well. So.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel for you though. That's got to be, potentially an isolating place to be, but definitely a difficult place to start from creatively when you don't have that sort of immediate feedback response of, maybe just jamming to explore an idea and having someone bounce off of you in that way. I would hate to be a painter, like for that very same reason. No wonder, like you see a lot of frustration and anger in people who create visual art because there's just, there's never, for many at least, never like that point of feeling truly satisfied with what you're doing, I think. And I mean, everybody kind of responds to that on some level, but if there were any famous painting duos, maybe that would be a much more positive place to come from artistically. But I don't know. I mean, some people are just wizards though, and they can just like you said, your friend Mallory is pretty prolific, right?
Yeah, she's amazing, man, and she's just one of those people that. Like even if she just doodles on stuff, it's like awesome, and she's always been like that ever since I went to high school with her. So
even Noah, I really love following his social media, just like kind of watching his process develop, but he's also fairly prolific seemingly with his ability to just create and generate art like so rapidly. I popped real hard there with
it's okay. I can fix those. I'm going to go through and kind of dull them down a little bit. Squish them.
Squish my pops.
But it's definitely not going to be perfect because we unfortunately don't have a pop filter for Nick Hinton over there. He's just running that mic, which is doing a pretty good job actually.
Yeah,
it's doing pretty good.
If I get a little too intimate with it, that's when I have a problem.
Popping with it.
It's all right. I can get what was that bass outside? What was that?
That was motorcycle.
Car driving. Oh.
Yeah, okay. It sounded like a motorcycle. Somebody revving their engine there, but
vroom vroom. Sorry for that.
Yeah, you were saying Noah's prolific in his way, and he's just one of those dudes. He's just one of those guys that just. I don't want to say shit's creativity, but he's a constant conduit for the absurd.
Well, I mean, that we had attempted at one point to try and launch a different podcast project where it was very theater of the mind and like improvisational and heavily psychedelic. And there were so many times where I just felt so dwarfed by his creativity that it clammed me up. And it was just my own self-consciousness. And that unfortunately sucks for everyone else involved, but like, I'm like, Jesus Christ, what is with this guy that he is able to seamlessly freestyle rap about, like, there was one bit that we got into where he just starts freestyling, but from the perspective of the guy who's paralyzed in the Metallica 1 video. And it was amazing. Like I was mind blown, as I am perpetually anytime I'm able to observe Noah Miles do anything. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm shocked that someone like him can even exist because it's amazing.
He's an enigma for sure. I mean, like, and Noah Miles, for people listening, Noah Miles actually played bass in Dead Birds Adore Us, and he's an excellent bass player too. Very creative, like always has some kind of riff, like right on hand kind of thing. But one of the things that I really enjoyed from his dynamic in the band was when we started out, we were an instrumental band, and we didn't want to force vocals on anything just because you need to have vocals. So instead of vocals, we had our buddy Jaron Kelly playing with us, and he did visuals. So he kind of replaced that vocal that vocal kind of gap, I guess you could say, that void, really, that vocal void. He got to replace that with basically a stream of visuals that he would come up with on the spot, and then eventually, like, he was basically a part of the band in that sense. He was our singer, you know, and Noah had a good way of interacting with the audience, and it started just as a joke because we have this little vocal processor that does all kinds of absurd sounds and stuff. They have aliens, they have chipmunks on there, but then they also got some real deep sounding ones like this. So he would just get on that thing and riff, and I still have a few of those online and they still just crack me up because he just goes, and you don't know where he's pulling his ideas from, but they're coming to him as quickly as they're leaving his mouth, you know, just. But he would interact with the crowd on that, so his kind of comedic vibe and his like absurdity and his wit were all translating seamlessly through that vocal thing and interacting with people. So like people didn't know what to make of it. Some people were upset that they couldn't understand because we're dead birds adore us, and we like playing music. Like, it was just real awkward, real deadpan, just, oh man, that was probably my favorite contribution of his out of the thing, because that just, like, that opens up an entirely different vibe. Not only do you not have a singer, but the only voice you're hearing is, like, one of those masked voices on the, you know, on Discovery Channel when, you know, victims on there that shouldn't be on there.
Well, and from the audience perspective, it's like it's this artistic choice that doesn't seem to be rooted in anything specific. It's just a thing, right? But it has this magical way of sucking you in because it's certainly not what you expect. And you may or may not be able to understand it, but if you do understand it, chances are you're probably gonna laugh pretty hard at some point, just because of, like, he's such a goofy fucking dude. Like, he's so funny, like, organically, and
organically funny. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And it very much sets a precedent for an experience.
Yeah.
Which, you know, sadly, at least here locally, is something that our music scene has always kind of seemed to be rather devoid of.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, we had our weird little way of making it a show. Like we like the idea of getting all of the senses, because you're gonna hear us and then you're gonna see us with Jaron doing his mind bending shit, and then like at our first show, our friend Noah's girlfriend at the time, Jess Perot, she actually made cupcakes, so like you could actually taste us too, and we burned incense during the show, so we got all of the senses. Like you're gonna feel the music, you can hear the music, taste the cupcakes, smell the incense that we used is a hand dipped frankincense and sandalwood. It's very specific, and it had a very specific smell,
like a very temple sort of a vibe.
Yes, exactly. And
welcome to church, motherfucker.
Exactly. Like, and we would burn it every show, and I know that had to have affected people on some level. Yeah. You know, like it had to have, because it affects me, and it's just like you have this band that you see, and then you get this faint whiff of this thing. I was like, oh God, it's happening again. You know, here we go.
You took too much, Karen.
Karen, I'm gonna have to ask you to stay on the line here. Just try to remember, this is real. This is happening
now.
And it kind of had this like slight southern draw. His like his character.
Yeah. That's got to be
on the line.
That's a definitive character that seems to exist in his psyche.
Oh, for sure.
I want to know about the root of that.
Oh, we'll get it out of him. Yeah. We're gonna have Noah on this show for sure. But he has a few names of it. One of them's Chaz and Dagar, and one of them is Russ Mulvey. I guess it depends on where he's at mentally that day, if he's Chaz or Russ. But and then we would record videos like promoting our upcoming shows, and it would be him in front of that microphone riffing, and dude, it would just go off the rails. Like one of our things on there was like literally him. It started when he was on the microphone and he was riffing, and it sounded like Christopher Walken for a second, and we were like, oh shit, that sounded like Christopher Walken. I was trying a Christopher Walken impression, and then that turned into like one of those fat Italian mobster guys, like. Just I don't know how I can recreate that, but he basically ended up threatening to bash the audience face with a brick, and then using the brick to grind beans to make coffee and stay up and wait for the next person who doesn't come to the show. And then he finishes it with, "You better come, because I got a lot of coffee beans." It's like such a deadpan, like I don't know, kind of inside joke thing, and I'm sure it seems so stupid to some people listening, man. But I don't care. But that kind of thing, like he would just get on that wavelength and he would take it all the way down. And then of course, like my creativity came in that thing because I had all this footage of him being ridiculous, and I'm like, oh, I'm going with this. And I used Adobe Premiere to make him have like a big head, like it's in a dark background. He's wearing a Cocker Spaniel sleeves cut off t-shirt. Like, it's just what?
I'm really thankful that all of that content still exists.
Oh, it's still there.
Because I think our eventual audience would probably really get a kick out of experiencing some of that, especially given how we've sold it so far.
Yeah,
so.
And they're gonna be like, Ryan, you ruined that. Like that was so much better than anything you're saying. But no, if anybody wants to see that, that's on the Dead Birds of Doris YouTube. There's all kinds of videos on there. There's stuff from our shows. There's those little advertisements that we kind of made, and then some of those just weird like little videos that just came out of like Noah jumping on the microphone when we were, in the middle of a break, and then just starting to tell a story from whatever perspective, whether he's a dead person that got hit by a Mercedes 300 E-Class and dragged on the highway, and he's coming back for Karen. By the way, we came up with the whole Karen thing. Like we covered the Karen ground first, and then Karen turned into this amorphous like meme person. The bob haircut needs to speak to the manager thing, which is like, okay, I get that, but Karen and our Karen is. She's troubled.
Yeah. A little more adventurous.
Probably not the best upbringing.
Yeah. Not at all a good role model for children.
Not at all. No. And
in fact, an example of exactly what not to become as a human being, perhaps.
Yeah. So that was our Karen, and that was just another one of Noah Miles' insanity.
Brain children.
Yeah, I can't wait to get him on here. He's just gonna go crazy with it. I'm just gonna let it happen.
We're gonna have to make like a super clip of like the best of Noah Miles.
He'll just be a recurring guest. Hey, what are you doing today, Noah? Yeah, come over.
Well, we can stitch Noah in all over the place. Anyway,
so we pretty well covered like my creative process, but I know in Hotel Tango right now you were doing a lot of making hand sanitizer because you're trying to stay relevant with the times, and I definitely appreciate that. That's something that I'm noticing that a lot of businesses are doing is, some businesses are just getting destroyed, and maybe that's unavoidable, but some of them are using it to pivot into something slightly different. Yeah. And now that everything's starting to open back up, are going to incorporate that. Is that kind of what's happening with Hotel Tango?
Yeah, so that's what's happening with us. And I hadn't mentioned them directly by name before, but yeah, that's who I currently work for is Hotel Tango Artisan Distillery in Indianapolis, Indiana. We make and distribute spirits. I think we're maybe in like 10 or 12 states so far now. It's definitely growing at a pretty good clip. They've been around for like 5 years, I think, so far, just over the 5-year mark. Me personally, I've been with the company for a little over a year now, and I started out just as a distiller's assistant. I had shut down my pig chips business and had kind of resigned myself to the fate of working for other people, and I got a job at a local brewery, just helping manage the tap room over there, and wound up leaving that place and bartending for events as my primary source of income, and then got a part-time job at Tango, just helping out our head distiller over there, Bobby Yates. But an opportunity opened up that was a bit more in line with my own, personal history with, the pig chips business. And so I took the job as the back of house manager, essentially. And I covered it briefly, I think, in our first episode, but I'm in charge of the cocktail program. It's my responsibility to not only develop new ingredients, stuff that just simply does not exist, but since we're an artisan distillery, we can't use any outside spirits or ingredients in our tasting room. So if we want to try and replicate a really good classic margarita, well, we don't make tequila because you can't make tequila outside of Jalisco, but our rum has a bit of a buttery sort of a vibe to it that can kind of parallel tequila, and what we lack there would be like a Grand Marnier or a triple sec, some sort of like an orange liqueur. Well, guess what? We've got an orange liqueur. We've actually got a couple. We've got a dry curacao. We also do, we make our version of an Ameripicon. We do all sorts of fun stuff. So Amari, infusions, and ultimately, from my standpoint, my job, my responsibilities, we've got to keep pushing the envelope in terms of new, undone things that nobody's really tried before, or hadn't really considered, or at least not many people have, in terms of, like, say, what flavor combinations we're using, what sort of overall cocktail presence we're going for, how things look, the aesthetics of everything. So it's up to me to kind of guide that experience and say, well, summer's coming up. What sort of flavors do I want to work with? And as of right now, I'm settling on I want to work with a lot of guava. So I want to do a lot of like tropical fun stuff, but not super desserty and sweet. So I'm gonna do like a kiwi and guava, or like a banana and guava, maybe with a little strawberry. And then we'll go a totally different direction with something a bit more floral and dry and less sweet on the palate. And then we'll try and recreate an old fashioned in 50 different ways and see what, works the best. So, some of the crazy stuff that I've concocted, or what my predecessors in that role had concocted, everything from duck fat washed bourbon to toasted marshmallow whiskey that's not especially sweet for what it is. Or one thing that I'm kind of playing around with, I really want to make a bubblegum vodka that's actually made with herbs for flavoring. So kind of a more traditional bubblegum flavor profile, without anything artificial color-wise or flavor-wise. Because, that's important to me. Like, I want to try and create a flavor experience that's fortified with natural ingredients. So, I don't have to dig myself into a hole explaining why I used some weird synthesized chemical-based flavoring additive. Anybody could do that, but who, in this realm, who wants to be the next pinnacle of vodka, right? Like, I don't need to make a whipped cream vodka that badly that I need to use like some crazy, creepy, not probably good for you, antifreeze, but for me, I draw a lot of inspiration from other food realms. One thing that I recently did that I was absolutely in love with, and it was a bit decadent, so it had to be used with a light touch, but I made an orgeat, which is essentially a simple syrup that's based in like a nut milk, like almond milk. So it's creamier texture, but it's just as sweet as like a standard 1-to-1 simple. I made a salted caramel passion fruit orgeat. And I even went the extra step of throwing a little bit of edible glitter in there, a little gold to really bring out the richness of that like caramely, passion fruity, golden yellow tone. And it wound up being something that, when used appropriately, like not in excess of a half an ounce in any drink, just because it was a very sweet ingredient, it was magical and super rich and very like, it had the sort of flavor that seems like it would cost a lot of money, to experience. Think like the dessert equivalent of like a white truffle, but that was something that I drew inspiration from a dessert maker who was combining those flavors, passion fruit and salted caramel, which when I first heard about that seemed absurd. Like, how do you get from A to B there? And then you take that concept and then you start playing with it yourself, and then you start to understand what's happening and how, passion fruit's a very tart, a high acidity sort of a fruit, and it's a beautiful flavor, but it can also be really, really overwhelming. And salted caramel, that's essentially just like sugar, salt, butter, that's like very rich and almost overpoweringly sweet. But then you combine those two things, you've got the right acid balance to the sugar balance, and then you add this other dimension of like buttery, savory, salty, sort of a flavor profile, and that just elevates everything, and it meshes everything in a way that hits the palate in a really unexpected manner. And then, you make a strawberry rhubarb infused limoncello and add a little bit of passion fruit salted caramel orgeat to it, and just a touch of lemon juice or lime juice, and then you've got something that's kind of mind blowing. So that's, for me, in terms of inspiration, I try and take that from the world around me as much as possible, because at the end of the day, a cocktail is an experience that, it's a liquid art form. You've got a huge array of flavor to work with, and then you want to, of course, use flavors that don't mask but actually complement the base spirit. Especially for us as an artisan distillery, it's all about increasing our presence nationally, getting our bottles of booze into stores across the country at the end of the day. So we want to create a drink that uplifts that base product, because we don't want to hide what we're trying to sell you. So it becomes like a very multi-dimensional art form, because you've got the flavor, you've got the base spirit to consider within the flavor, you've got the visual appearance of the cocktail itself, down to the color of the liquid, whether or not there are layers, whether or not there are bubbles, what sort of ice you're using, what the garnish is. Not only the garnish for the visual appeal, but say you're using a rosemary sprig. Is that rosemary sprig bringing out some of the grapefruit that you've got in your liquor infusion or liqueur? So that it becomes this like multi-prismatic, multi-dimensional sort of an experience. Then you've got the texture. What does the liquid feel like on your palate and on your tongue? So, for me, it's become this totally unexpected but completely engrossing medium. And also it kind of gets people a little wasted, and like, so it's just this, it's really unexpected for me, but it's also something that I am fully engrossed in and really, really enjoy. And I've even branched out from there, stealing concepts outright at times. Like we don't have a full service kitchen. We typically source local snacks to sell in our tasting room, because we have to have some sort of available food offering, and we want to support local as much as possible. But also, it's within our best interest to have a broad variety of options, especially options with good margins, but also that are perhaps more affordable than the local deli's charcuterie box. So stealing one from Smucker's, I think, I've created a snack product that I call Crusty No-Nos. And basically it's like taking the Smucker's Uncrustable product and adultifying it a little bit with nothing but local ingredients. Like we're here in Indianapolis. I'm getting bread from a bakery in Fort Wayne. I'm getting nut butters from a local nut butter company. I'm getting jams from like a regional Amish farm, and doing everything from elderberry jam with chai spiced almond butter to a brunch donut filled with an herbed crema style cheese and a house-made raspberry and fig compote that I whipped up. So really taking some very simple, basic things and, finding ways to give something to our like core customer base that's not only super, super affordable, but might help them maintain their own level of sobriety a bit, but also be super elevated. So like something that's got a lot of dimension and a lot of impact and good, robust flavor kind of across the board. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's I don't know if that's so much a dive into my process. My process involves a lot of trial and error, probably a bit less if I were classically trained in these mediums. But as soon as I got into the food world, one thing that I did when I officially launched the Pig Chips business is I said, okay, well, I've never actually worked in a kitchen before. I've waited tables, but never created food, never saw kind of behind the curtain, so to speak, other than just through, a pass-through window. So I went to work for a friend of mine who's a local chef at a country club, and I started just kind of washing dishes so I could get immersed in that world. And that moved to line cooking and plating and, really helped me develop my understanding for cooking in general. And there are a lot of parallels between restaurant cooking and creating cocktails. I mean, creating recipes using proven techniques, taking existing techniques and twisting them to get a slightly skewed response from, whatever it is that you're working with, whether it's taking limes and putting them in the oven at 200 degrees for a day and a half, or using an ultrasonic cleaning machine with some rum and some oak cubes, some French oak cubes, and a bunch of spices to make like a really delicious aged spiced rum in 12 hours. I mean, it's like a never-ending playground for me, and I couldn't be more excited about that. It's great. I'm a lucky person.
That's really interesting. That's something I never thought about with all of that. With creating drinks like that is really enhancing the base spirit, because that's the purpose of it. Like you can make the most delicious thing in the world, and if it contributes nothing to the base spirit, then it's garbage.
Right. Right. Just buy some Kamchatka. Yeah. And call it a day.
Yeah. Oh man, Kamchatka. We used to call that Chaco. Go get some Chaco.
Oh, to be 19 again.
Yeah. Yeah, no. But yeah, I was going to say, so like there is a point there where you're doing a lot of experimenting and a lot of trial and error, and I'm sure like you're utilizing other people's taste buds as well. So when you come up with something that might be okay, that might be missing something, does it kind of help in those situations to show people and get their feedback? Like
yes, and well, okay, so with cocktailing, as with cooking, there are certainly a set of parameters that are accepted, right? In terms of how something is prepared, or what components equal this particular result. So for example, a daiquiri. A daiquiri is one of my favorite cocktails because it's just so simple, but on a hot summer day, if it's made right, like I don't know that you're going to find anything that's like as refreshing if you're consuming booze, right? But you're looking at 2 parts rum, 3/4 of a part sugar, being simple syrup, 3/4 of a part fresh lime juice, and then you just shake the hell out of it, like ×3. You just like shake it and shake it and shake it to death, and that's it.
Can you tell when a drink hasn't been shaken enough?
Depending on what it is, yeah. Like, so for a daiquiri, right, if you just kind of do the bare minimum, it's still going to taste pretty good, but at a certain point, it comes down to the texture. How aerated is that solution? How much water has dissolved through the shaking with ice to perhaps thin it out a bit. And also to blend those flavors more thoroughly. So there's definitely a difference. If you give me one side to side, I will definitely be able to tell you if they're built with exactly the same ingredients, which one is better, and it's definitely going to be the one that was shaken more thoroughly. There is an upper threshold to that. If you ultimately shake it until all the ice is melted, that's probably not going to be an awesome cocktail. But good, thorough, continued shaking with a daiquiri is the way to go. But if those proportions of spirit to sugar to acid are not met, technically it's not a daiquiri. So you probably shouldn't call it that. If it's frozen, you shouldn't call it a daiquiri because it's not. So it becomes a situation where if you're going to be a craft cocktail bar, which we're not just, I mean, that is the tasting room side of our business is craft cocktailing, but also motivating bottle sales. So a perfectly mixed daiquiri with those proportions is going to be pretty boozy, but it's also going to be super, super delicious. And you're not going to be taken seriously at a certain point if you're not following those specific parameters. Like calling an old-fashioned when you've got 6 ingredients in it is kind of a stretch. And people that really care, and you might argue that some of those people are unnecessarily douchey about their realm that they're judging within. But at the same time, like you want to pay tribute to what got you to where you are. And I think that that's important. I feel like a lot of art for a lot of people, like I'd mentioned, my own influences and how sometimes I'm like just outright trying to rip something off and twist it on its head. That's on some level, that's me paying tribute to what has come before me, because ultimately I'm not so creative that I am able to just invent something completely from nowhere. It's got to have a grounding in something that already exists. I think that that's probably true of every single bit of art, period.
Right.
And while it might not look like at first glance like it has any relation to anything else, like with, some of the crazier animation that exists nowadays, like stuff that's just so bizarre and whacked out. But then you actually pay close attention, you see that, oh, well, this like actually has a lot of parallels to like the teachings of, ancient philosophers or the speculations of drug-addled lunatics that we know and love. I mean, there are always starting points, I think, for every bit of art, and I don't think that it's a shameful thing to make your own version of something that you already love.
No, that reminds me of 2 different quotes. Like if you take from one place, that's plagiarism. If you take from everything, that's inspiration, or sure. Something along those lines. I'm butchering that one, but what was the other one? I don't quite remember. But I mean, yeah, you. The other one was from someone, again, I don't remember, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but basically it says like creativity happens when you combine things, so I take this over here and this over here, these seemingly unrelated things, and I make something new out of it. And like one of the examples that I remember in one of my old like art and design books was it was looking at all these Picasso paintings, and it's just like, yeah, if you're looking at this, you probably won't be able to see any of his inspiration. And then they show you a bunch of older like African masks. And it's just like, okay, well, how do you feel about it now? And it was there was certainly a theme there where like he pulled from something like that, but he also added this entirely different element of just these mind-bending surrealist paintings and stuff. But yeah, it's interesting how you can take from different places and you don't really need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe these different cocktails, man, they like all just already kind of have their place and have their niche, and it's easier and more productive and maybe even more creative to take those things and make them interesting, but also tailor them specifically to the spirit that you're working with. That's really interesting.
Well, I'm not trying to make a cocktail out of vapor inside of a balloon,
right?
Like Parks and Rec. But you put it really well. I think it was last night actually when we were talking. You said something to the effect of, everything already exists, but not every combination of things already exists. Yeah. And I mean, that's, if you can be as open-minded as that, then literally, like, there's no limit to the possibility of creation.
Right.
When you take something that exists and then you can, like, add a completely different layer to it, or look at it from exactly the opposite side and create from there, or like reverse engineer and take a different, like, path along that like sort of discovery exercise. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, that's where the magic lies, is in between those things. Mm-hmm. At least for me.
Yeah. Those seemingly unrelated things that when you put them right next to each other, it's just like, oh wow, where did this come from? It's just,
yeah, a lot of art, I think, is highlighting universal overlaps.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to touch on this too. One of the things that's interesting about what you do and what I do is that they're very what's the word? I almost want to say ethereal, but that's not quite the right word. Abstract, in the sense that, like, you are using really, you're using several different senses, but primarily your taste. Like, you have to be really, like, in tune with your taste buds and how you're perceiving things. And with me, it's mostly my ears. Like, I see music and most sounds and stuff kind of like a painting, and I'm kind of sculpting this painting of sound, you know, and I can't put my hands on it. You know, it's not like a sculpture that's in front of me. It's not like a painting that's in front of me that I can, like, really see. Like, I think humans, probably our vision is one of the more refined senses that we have. We can see in such extreme detail and focus on many different places really quickly. But when you're trying to paint a picture with sound or compose something with your taste buds, you know, that's just, that becomes so not complicated. You know where I'm getting with this.
And I love the word that you just used. You said compose.
Yeah.
And because, so from my perspective, while I do a lot of my own creating, I also, so for cocktails, right? Anytime we're planning a menu, we have an ideation phase where I'm saying, okay, these are the ingredients that I've created for you to use this cycle. Give me your best shot, and I'll leave it up to them to create some of the recipes. And I'll have some of my own that are in the back of my head, but for the most part, the cocktail recipes themselves, I'm relying heavily on my bar staff. And so they'll take these concepts and they'll create something that, may not necessarily be finished, right? So they'll make a cocktail, they'll pass it to me, and they'll say, well, here's the thing that I made with your smoked butterscotch blobbity bloop. And I'll taste that. And the way that I experience it is very synaesthetic. A cocktail for me, in my mind's eye, has color beyond what's actually in the glass. It has color and it has sound, for lack of a better sense. And I almost hear the cocktail like it's a piece of music, or at least a phrase. Mm-hmm. And I am always looking for a balance, right? There are high tones and there are low tones. And sometimes the low tone is the spirit, and sometimes the low tone is, like, say, in a gin or vodka cocktail, the low tone is a non-alcoholic ingredient or a bittering agent, or sometimes a bittering agent is a high tone. So there are lots of different directions to go from there. But when I take a sip and I'm looking for picking out the ingredients that exist in the cocktail, seeing how those are playing off of each other, it can create kind of like a tingly, sort of a chimey sort of a situation. And then there may be this deep low tone, but nothing bridging them in the middle. No mid-range sound that binds everything. There are just these almost cacophonous sort of bits of taste bud sound happening. Or maybe it's more of a like a color sort of thing. More often than not, for a cocktail, for me, it's almost musical. And I don't know that that's necessarily the best way of describing it. That's just the best way for me to relate it to another person. Mm-hmm. This cocktail is missing some bass. Mm-hmm. We need something that's going to ground it out, because it's just kind of off in the clouds, and it's hard to taste all of what's happening there without something to rounded out on the bottom. So I love that you use compose, because that is exactly how I process it. And I mean, when I listen to your music, it is very, very visual for me. I see landscape. I see a lot of color. So I think you use some pretty apt terms, at least for my own purposes.
Yeah, it's interesting, the overlap there that we're looking at, like, you know, making a cocktail versus making a song. Like, I think that was a really good analogy, especially for me, because I sort of have it overlapped visual in a way. Like when I'm seeing sound, I'm seeing it as a painting, and you know, just like you were said, sometimes it's missing that bass or that lower mid-range that's kind of gluing everything together. You're like, man, I've got some great stuff up here, but it's not balanced in a way. It's like, it's kind of just, and it's okay to have things that are unbalanced as long as it's
purposefully.
Yeah, deliberately unbalanced, you know?
Right.
And it's like a statement kind of, it's like learning the rules and then breaking them, you know? But yeah, there's a lot of that for me in my music. Is like it helps you. It almost helps, like, looking at it in a synaesthetic way to identify the gaps of it, because in different creative pursuits, music especially, it becomes difficult when you immerse yourself so deeply in it that it routes itself in your consciousness. You have, I think there's a term for it, like a demo brain, demo ear or something. But basically, when you hear the demo too many times, and then when it finally gets produced, you're like, that sounds shitty because it's not what I'm used to, you know?
Right.
It's like taking your favorite song and then they remix it and do something a little bit different and do like a different approach. And you're like, yeah, no, I don't like it. So you might like it, but it doesn't. You're comparing it with what's kind of routed in your brain. So with music, the only palate cleanser that I have is time. And that is so frustrating because you get so immersed in it, you're just like, man, I don't know what it needs. I don't have anybody to bounce it off of. Like, I'm missing something here, but I can't put my finger on it. And then you put it away for a few weeks and you come back to it, and like you come back to it with a fresh ear and a fresh perspective. And then you hear it almost like the first time again, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a response that I constantly reference when making music is, like, I'll send stuff to people and just to get their first time impression, because I can't get that anymore. You know, it reaches a point where I was just like, well, I can't hear this for the first time. Like, I'm hearing it with the bias of it already carved in my head. So It's hard to separate those two. But it's just really interesting how we both have a synesthetic process, like, in different directions, taste going to sound going to visual, like. And then there's also, like, you know, there's a visual element to what you do too, obviously. And I suppose there's a visual element to what I do in terms of, like, branding and artwork and the images that I select for representing it.
Sure.
And that's something that I've always appreciated, is like a very clever juxtaposition of two different things. And that's why Tool was one of my favorite bands for years and years and years, because they were masters at that. They like had this really particular sound, but they also paired it with these really unsettling images and these, like, geometric shapes and things that were, like, kind of intriguing and almost like a candy trail to a lot of different literature and points of view and stuff. And yeah, that overlap is just especially interesting, which is, again, why I'm, like, really excited about having Jessica on, because she's also another brilliant person when it comes to that overlap of senses in a particular work of art.
Yeah, I get the distinct impression that through some of these discussions, we're about to embark on a very wild ride of discovery.
Yeah, man.
It might, like, I don't think that either of us have much of an expectation, so to speak, but I think that whatever expectation we have might be blown out of the water just by the content that we wind up unearthing. But I also think it's funny. You mentioned that you found it interesting, you know, the synesthetic kind of, like, chain of how our mediums interact. I also find it interesting how you said the thing that helps is time. The thing that helps on my end can also be time, but for totally different reasons. It's because while things might start sounding shitty to you, everything on my end starts tasting way too good when, when you're sampling 15 cocktails in a row.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Even though you're having only 1 or 2 sips apiece, that's oftentimes all it takes to get you there, so to speak. And there is not a good place to be offering judgment of quality.
Good point. Like, I never thought, man, dude, if I ever think music is frustrating, man, would it be frustrating if it intoxicated me while I was doing it? Like, shit. It is so hard already that, man, if it, like, okay, the longer you do this, the more warped your perception of reality is going to be. It's like, shit. It kind of does that in a way with your ears, like, especially when you're mixing and mastering something. I've had situations where I go to my car to listen to a mix, and I'm like, what is wrong with this file? It sounds like it's twice as fast, or slowed way down. And I'm like, dude, I messed something up. And lo and behold, like, it wasn't messed up. It was just the way I was hearing it. Yeah. And I couldn't shut that off. It wasn't like, oh, hey, that's funny. Okay, back to normal. All right, come on. Yeah, it was.
Well, I think most artistic mediums can be intoxicating, and not just from things like paint fumes or adhesive fumes, but I mean, I think just living within your own art for too long without taking a moment to step away and get some clean air is potentially maddening. And I don't mean intoxicating in a good way. I mean, like, can put you into a really, really unhealthy mental space potentially. But maybe sometimes it's worth exploring the depths of those.
I live there most of the time. I feel like that's my MO, is a really quiet form of madness.
Yeah, but it's the right kind of pressure a lot of times for creating some of the magic you manifest.
Yeah. That's maybe we can touch on this and then wrap it up. But like one of the things I find intriguing is that a lot of times I don't like making music, I just don't enjoy it. Like I mean, there are times I hate it, right. But like I like playing guitar. Like I like training jujitsu. Like those are just like immediately gratifying pursuits. But music, it's like the end result is intensely satisfying, but the journey itself is sometimes like, fuck, I hate this, just like all of my, especially in a certain point, all of your demons come up and they're all staring you right in the face and you can't see anything else. Like your insecurities, your your impatience, all of that stuff just comes right up, and it's just like you start having the thought, well, I'm just going to quit. Like this sucks. Like this isn't worth my effort. I'm spending all my time doing this. Like nobody likes what I'm doing. Like why the fuck would I do that? And then, I went through all of this recently, getting at the end of this EP, getting at the end of arranging this, because I was making the final touches on some songs, and I'm just like, man, is this garbage? And I'm just like so immersed in it that I can't tell, or do I actually enjoy this? And eventually I came back to, well, what would I do if there were just nobody on the planet? I was like, well, I'd still make music. I'd probably just be a little less critical about it. I'm like, well, let's try to operate from there. That seems like a better place to create from. But one of the things, one of my strategies for that whole like brief little abyss there was I just tried to normalize it. I was just trying to think that like, okay, well, this is normal.
Get comfortable living in that place of discomfort and dissatisfaction.
But also saying that it's something that everybody experiences, not just me. It's probably you would probably be harder pressed to find an artist that doesn't experience that than one that does.
Well, and I would argue even that recognizing that and embracing it can actually be a super motivating or like progress inducing sort of a thing, because acknowledging that it's not necessarily going to go away, but that it might get more easy to manage with more like proliferation of content, right? Might be like a substantial thing for your own growth and development artistically and otherwise. So I mean, just, okay. So as your friend, someone who's known you for probably a decade now, right? Like at least 10 years. Yeah.
Longer. Like,
Jesus Christ.
I think we met in 2006.
Yeah, 5 or 6 before my first child was born.
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty sure it was 2006. But that'd be what, 14 years?
Yeah, every bit of that. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, I've known you for a while. I've known you really well for a good amount of that, and I've seen a pretty solid progression along this timeline that you're on. And I don't mean from a place of like judging you for anything. I mean, as far as like your development goes, you seem to be getting just better at life and managing yourself in general. And it's something that I personally really appreciate seeing, because it's something for me to focus on and strive to, personally, and trying not to judge myself too critically for it, because that's not going to help me, but recognizing, hey, this dude's like on his shit for the most part, except for when he's like wallowing in his own like artistic misery. But yeah, I appreciate your positive example in terms of like your own growth and how you've expressed that in the world. So
I appreciate that, and I could say a lot of the same things about you, just watching you over the years progress, and like, man, especially managing having 3 kids. Like I don't know how you and Pam do it. Like it's just like they're amazing children, but they're still children.
Yes, very much children.
They do children things, and they need that children guidance and attention, and yet you manage to like lift off pig chips for a bit, and you're managing working full-time jobs and managing for a while training jiu-jitsu, and that's not easy. Mad respect to anybody who's got kids and still aspires to do something more than working a set work schedule and coming home and putting on the TV and say, all right, kids, look at this,
Right. Hey, don't get me wrong. Don't give me too much credit. Those exist in my
for
life.
Sure.
For sure.
That happens, but not just that, and that's like not all of it. I mean, you guys went on a bike ride the other day. That's,
that's
or did you?
What we do more than anything together is go on bike rides.
Nice.
And yes, we did. Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
It was a short ride. We only took one big lap around the neighborhood, but
yeah.
I mean, that's 25, 30 minutes of like time well spent with my youngest kids, and then otherwise, got the whole podcast thing with the oldest one, and she rides with us sometimes, but she's also a lazy little shit.
She's getting into that teenager phase.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty soon you're not going to know anything. I remember when nobody knew better than me. And then I was like, oh God, I know nothing.
Well, I wanted to ask you before I forget, if Lead Salad starts playing out as an act, can I make a cocktail or a shot for Lead Salad performances?
Yes. I don't ever see that ever being like performed anywhere. It's like it's like a recording artist type outlet. Like I am making music, but man, I need this computer thing right here to make it happen. So like actually performing it, I did consider like playing some of the songs maybe at like an open mic or something like that. Just kind of a stripped down version of just like, look what I can do,
Right.
But as far as anything serious goes, but yeah, definitely. If I do, for sure, you got to make a leaden salad. Lead to gold drink.
I can do it. I guess otherwise, if that doesn't happen, I'm just going to have to hold out hope that Deadbirds gets back together at some point.
Make a Deadbird cocktail.
Reunion show.
Hey, man. Nothing's impossible.
Hell yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are impossible. We just don't know it yet. So everything is effectively on the table.
Love it.
Wow, that was a loud click. I'm going to avoid doing that in the future. Sorry to anybody who had to hear that nonsense.
That's all right. They can handle it.
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel this has gone so far? We're almost 2 hours in, man.
Yeah, dude. Like I think we definitely found a flow, and we covered a lot of ground, which is kind of what I anticipated. And even yesterday, you were talking about, we were trying to ideate the names, and we were coming up with names and stuff, and like being really critical of it. And you were trying to break down like the main kind of purpose or the thing that was like making me curious about this. And the best word that I could come up with at the time, may not have been the most creative word, was exploration, and that's just the most appropriate, because like I'm not trying to synthesize all this knowledge into a diagram or like
an infographic,
or a scientific paper about the creative process. Like I don't really care about that, but like I'm just genuinely interested in exploring how other people are approaching it, because like I'm also genuinely, like, not to sound pretentious, but I'm genuinely interested in my own process and the way that I'm looking at it. I'm like, that's weird that I look at it like that. Like I look at it like a painting, like that it's on a canvas. And now, like, even just talking with you, you're looking at it like a sound, like, and that's just interesting to me. So wherever it goes is kind of like whatever. I don't anticipate this to be always like feel goody all the time. Like, I mean, we both kind of have a weird sense of humor, and we're both, I'd like to think, pretty well-rounded kind of people, but I do anticipate talking with people about creative stuff that it's going to get dark at times, and I'm letting that ride. Like, I don't want to come on here and, lace this entire thing with profanity and like, dick jokes and stuff. But I mean, if it gets into some dark territory, ladies and gentlemen, just don't listen to us.
Well,
ever.
Much like a dick and a joke, it's bound to come up.
You had to get one in. That's going to be our sign off. Like, Nick's just going to drop a dick joke every.
That's too much pressure.
Or maybe he's going to slip it in there unnoticed.
Hey,
and
just like you did.
Oh,
hey.
Shit. See, I didn't even notice that. Damn. See, you got me. Damn.
All right, we're going way off the rails here. We should wrap this up.
All right, that's it for this edition of Forging Flame.
I love you.
I love you too. And we're talking to you.
More.
I love you the most.
I love you, Ryan.
I love you too, Nick.
Oh, let's end on a happy, loving note then.
All right. Bye.
Bye.